Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back, Nancy Nelson Show. Doug Pagitt sitting in for Nancy. It's good to be here on a Monday. I'm normally here on a Sunday afternoons. Now being here on a Monday evening.
Yeah.
So it's approaching evening time. Well, just put on my evening wear. Hey, this Saturday, though, if you want to get dressed up and you want to put on your evening wear, head on down to the Blue State Ball with the friends from AM 950. Because, see, here's what happens. We'll talk about this more in the final segment. You get together with your friends. Instead of being that one oddball at the conversation table, you get to be around a bunch of people that, you wanted to hang out with. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
You can talk politics. You can cut the rug. You can hit the open cash bar. I mean, you mix all that together, and it's going to be a great night.
Yeah.
A little politics dancing, a little cash bar.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Leave your
fantastic.
credit card at home.
And you're one day away from a big 10-year celebration. Did you know that? That's right. This Sunday is the 10-year birthday for last Sunday for No Child Left Behind.
Oh.
Yeah, the No Child Left Behind thing is 10 years old. Been around for 10 whole years already. And Michael Dietrich is here to tell us that maybe it didn't go so well over those 10 years. Michael, Doug Pagitt is sitting in for Nancy today. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Doug.
Yeah, it's been 10 years now, huh? That this experiment called No Child Left Behind, and some who might not remember, it was the little Texas experiments spread around the country to try to raise standards and to try to raise outcomes in our education system. And you're someone who has watched that with a different eye, and at least the people over at Minnesota 2020 for the last 10 years have been paying attention. How has it gone, this experiment called No Child Left Behind in our education system?
Well, it hasn't gone that well. The program is based around what George W. Bush did when he was governor of Texas, and then he just scaled it up after he became president. What we didn't know at the time was that what he had done in Texas had not actually done anything for outcomes, and by putting too much focus on standardized tests, had actually corrupted those measurements and led a lot of schools to have to consider cheating and finding ways to pressure students out if they were going to meet their targets.
Now, I remember when that conversation was happening during the campaign, 10 years ago, the presidential campaign, people were together on the goals, sort of the intention, the desire that teachers would be better supported, that the outcomes for students would be better. They seem to be the kinds of goals that everyone involved in education was supportive of. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I do think that the goal was noble. Ted Kennedy helped get the program put together,
Right.
although the Bush administration changed a lot of it on the back end. I mean, the idea itself is very sound. The idea that every student in our country should get a good education, that we should be able to know that they're getting a good education. These are incredibly worthwhile goals, and we've been talking about this to some degree going all the way back to the Reagan administration with a nation at risk. But this was one of the first times that a government policy said we're going to try to aim for 100% student proficiency. The only problem was that they relied on a very narrow definition of what it meant to have every student succeed, and they had some really bad ways to go about trying to make it happen.
And I know that your organization has suggested that really at the core of this was a misunderstanding of the origins of these gaps and how to solve those problems. Well, what is it that you think, after 10 years now, these experiments should have been done and can be done in the future?
Well, I think one of the fundamental misunderstandings of No Child Left Behind, and really a lot of education reform these days, is that we can try to fix the achievement gaps just by focusing on the traditional K-12 classroom. The achievement gap is really fundamentally about income and differences in income, and the fact that kids from low-income families tend to show up to kindergarten already behind and then fall further and further behind as the years go on. And we can't just fix this by telling our teachers to teach harder or by attaching carrots and sticks to standardized tests to try to encourage them to teach harder. That isn't what's going to do it. We need a much more comprehensive approach that starts a lot earlier with the health of the child and making sure that we've got quality early childhood education available to all families so that gap is a lot smaller when they show up to kindergarten.
Michael, what do you think the connection is between, so if low income is such a major contributor to the lack of success of children in public education, help me make the connection between starting kids earlier in school, helping to solve that problem that's being driven by a lack of income and sometimes a lack of a secure housing situation and lack of proper nutrition, or parents who can be around to invest in the kids. Why does that help to have someone start school at age 4 instead of age 5 if they're still coming out of a place of financial struggle?
I think if we're going to talk about supporting children, it actually needs to start much earlier than age 4, and it's not going to look like school as we understand it. It's going to be about making sure that parents are supported in taking care of their kids. It's going to mean making sure that parents know that it's important to talk to their kid even before the child can talk back. It is important that a child be addressed using grown-up language for things that aren't just about, oh, here comes your food. These sorts of things prime the child's brain for development and help them develop a vocabulary. Again, even before they start speaking, these kinds of activities help prime them for it. So making parents aware of those kind of steps and helping provide coaches to help parents out.
And how can that be accomplished? What kinds of things is Minnesota 2020 suggesting can be done to create those environments for parents to be supported and help? Because parenting's hard for all of us, right? Anybody's been a parent knows, like, you get this little sweetie and you're not sure what to do with them. You don't know how much pressure you should put or how much support you should do. You're kind of making it up as you go, especially in your first couple of kids for some of us. What kind of support is Minnesota 2020 suggesting for helping parents in these situations?
I think when we start talking about this, we move outside of just education to some of Minnesota 2020's other areas of focus,
right.
Like healthcare and economic development, making sure that we've got a strong economy and that parents, can find jobs to help support themselves, making sure that we've got a strong healthcare system that's working with expectant mothers, and then a strong social support system generally for after the child is born, getting them the support they need at lots of different levels. We look at countries like Finland that have put major emphasis on educational equity and had phenomenal results with it. A lot of what they're doing is focusing on support for the whole child through government programs going very early. And then once the child is in school, using schools as a point of delivery for other government services. They recognize that finding ways to use strong public investments to help support families is a way to decrease those effects of the income gap.
Now, that's interesting. In Minnesota, education development and theory that's going on so far, is that how people think about the schools as a delivery system for other kinds of governmental or societal support? Or do we think about education systems a little differently in Minnesota up until this point?
I think as a state, we've mostly been focusing on schools as places where children go to be educated. But
right, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of place.
Right.
Yeah.
But we are seeing some schools that are embracing a much broader view, the idea of a community school. So if you look at Brooklyn Center, for example, just north of Minneapolis, you see a school that has a clinic on site that is available to students and their families for free, or at least willing to work with insurance plans and provide lots of services to the students, much more than a typical school nurse. So that's one.
And in the like in the education community, is that looked upon favorably, or is that something that people feel discomfort with? That a school is going to be someplace more than just the location for 6 hours of educating 180 days a year, and becomes a more integrated part of a whole life delivery system? Is that resisted in the education system?
Oh, as always, you're going to find a lot of different perspectives on that. But I think a lot of people look at something like that and they say, okay, as an educator, I want the kids that I'm working with to be able to see. And if a child has vision problems, I want those to be addressed. And if that's not going to happen without me making sure that it happens through my school, then I want my school to help that happen. And a kid's going to have a hard time learning if they have a toothache. You can ask lots of teachers, and they'll tell you stories about the kid who was acting up in class until finally they were able to get to a dentist and get something addressed, and then they calm down just like that. There's a lot that goes into helping kids be ready to learn that isn't about that classroom experience. And so I think, especially for teachers who are working in higher needs communities, the idea that the school is a way to make sure that kids are getting access to good services because it would help them do their job better.
Yeah, and that really seems like a conversation that we should be having in the States, is to ask the question, what should the role of our education systems in our local schools be? Because I know that, some of the more politically conservative talking points tend to be built around limiting the amount of influence that schools have on children beyond teaching them what you can measure on the test. And everything else should be left to the family, or to religious training, or to activity programs or something. And there seems to be kind of an under the current battle going on. I think No Child Left Behind was sort of the front edge of this, to try to ask the question, what role should schools play in the development of a culture and a society?
I would agree that we've definitely seen a very narrow focus on what it is that schools should be trying to do. I would tie a lot of that back to this focus on standardized testing.
Right.
The idea being that, the score that you get for a kid or for a school on math and reading is the sum total of what you need to know about how well that school is functioning, is, I think, incredibly destructive. And we can see examples of schools here in Minnesota that are trying to beat that system. Basically, they recognize that that's how they're going to be judged, and so that's how they're going to respond. There are several charter schools in particular that do very, very well on the math and reading tests that the state administers. But when we start looking at what happens when you introduce a new test, like the science test that got rolled out 4 years ago,
Interesting.
They struggle a lot with that. And so the question is, if they're struggling with that, what else that we aren't testing are they struggling with?
And the Obama administration has made some changes to No Child Left Behind, but has continued it in whole part. Is that right?
Well, yeah. The way No Child Left Behind works, it set this goal of 100% proficiency by 2014. So that's kind of our deadline for we need to reevaluate the program by then. The situation we're in right now is that pretty much everybody agrees that it's a bad law and a bad set of policies. And that's people from the right and the left.
Right.
The only problem is people can't agree on what should replace it. So you have the president and people on that side with one set of arguments. You've got other people within the left who have a different set of ideas about what should be replacing it, and then you've got a whole mess of confusion on the right. So the problem is, while we all agree that it's bad, it's unlikely that we're going to see this Congress in particular address this going forward. So we're going to be left with what the Obama administration is doing right now with their waivers.
And if people want to keep up on this, they can do that over at Minnesota2020.com. Is that right, Michael?
Absolutely. Actually, .org, sorry.
.org. Minnesota2020.org. And Michael, thanks for being on the Nancy Nelson Show today.
Thank you very much.
Hey, stick with us, folks, over the break. One more segment before evening sets in. We'll talk a little bit about the Blue Stable.